All right, Valentine's Day is right around the corner, and what do you always forget and have to overpay for? Flowers. That's where 1-800-Flowers comes in. I've been working with them now for years, and I've been using them for even longer because they take the guesswork and the thought and the having to remember, you're busy, I'm busy, I get it. But we still want to give our significant other flowers. 1-800-Flowers solves that for you. It takes all the thinking and remembering out of the equation, and you can just essentially go online, set it, and forget it. 1-800-Flowers has a great selection of vibrant and romantic Valentine's rose bouquets starting at $29.99. Roses from 1-800-Flowers are picked at their peak and shipped overnight to ensure freshness and her amazement. Pick your delivery date and let 1-800-Flowers handle the rest. To order Valentine's bouquets, arrangements, and more starting at $29.99, like 18 red roses for $29.99, go to 1-800-Flowers.com/SSR. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/SSR. All right, everybody, Rob Ferretti here, and we're going to talk about Jerry Seinfeld, the accusation that he's selling a fake Porsche. Now, obviously, I could make a Seinfeld joke or reference in here. I will do my best not to, but we'll see if we can get to the bottom of this and figure out what's really going on, because the accusation has to sort of make sense. Now, we take for granted, it's tough being a celebrity. Being a celebrity either hurts you or helps you. Right now, everybody wants to be like, how could he do that? Why would he do that? And other people are like, that's Jerry Seinfeld. It's impossible he would do that. You have to remove your personal view of Seinfeld from the equation and look at the facts of what is being accused in order to try to figure out what's going on. Now, he was selling a 1958 356 Speedster, and I'm just going to read this because I want to make sure I get it right. It sold through the Gooding Auction Company for $1.54 million. It was a one of 56 GS ST model, and it was extremely rare because of the 692.0 4-cam engine, whole bunch of stuff most of us don't know, and it was one of the few or the only example with Oratanium green paint. So a very, very specific car. Now, it was restored for Jerry at European Collectibles in Orange County. Now, European Collectibles is a very, very well-known and respected shop that takes care of restoring vintage Porsches. And you have to realize that the accusation being made is that this guy or this company bought this car and then Jerry Seinfeld negligently tried to pass it off as a fake car. If you read all the news headlines, Seinfeld sells fake car, you're going to think the same thing I did. Like, oh, that's weird. Like, why would, like, I'm thinking that Seinfeld took a 356 Speedster replica and then tried to pass it off as a real car. That's not the case. This is focusing on the, like, specific aspects of somebody saying, yeah, I think that belonged to Elvis, or a paper trail, whatever it is. These are very, very specific facts, and it points out why the collectible market is so silly. It sort of takes the fun out of everything. It's not like he sold a 58 356 Speedster, gave them a 358 or a 1958 356 Speedster, but the accusation is, well, I paid more because some stupid reason where I think other people think it's worth more, and I don't think that's the case anymore. And now I think I've overpaid for something, or whatever the claim would be. Now, it's weird that they reached out to Seinfeld and he apologized and said he would make it right, but I get that. If somebody of a car collector stature as Jerry Seinfeld, if you don't know, has a whole lot of Porsches. And when I say a whole lot, probably like 50 or 100, whatever. He's got a lot of Porsches. And big dollar Porsches. He doesn't tangle around and like, oh, let me buy a Hoovie special, build up a salvage car, and then throw it in my collection. He buys legit cars, and like, you can't argue with that. Like, he's a legit collector. If he owns a car that wasn't what he thought it was, it's not something where he's negligently misrepresenting it. It's just he didn't know. He bought it and he paid experts, and you can only go off of what the experts tell you. And to bring it to a shop that is restoring it, and a reputable shop, and it goes through that process. It goes through the Gooding auction process, where all of the facts are looked into and checked. There's very, very little doubt in my mind that that car is probably what it was represented to be. Now, it's very easy to pull a gray area. Well, I think it's supposed to have a black shift knob and not a dark blue shift knob, so it can't be authentic. There's stuff like that, which is what could be happening. Now, I think what happened in this situation was that they bought the car, they may have paid more, or they thought they were getting a super deal, and it turns out they couldn't move the car for what they thought it was worth. Right there, what they did was like, oh shit, let's try to get out of this car. That's the only thing I could think of. I can't see. The thing about experts, and what's good about experts and bad about experts at the same time, is you go to any court and both sides have an expert arguing the same thing from a different perspective. Yes, this is why that happens. No, that's not why that. And you have, these guys are both experts arguing different sides of the same fact. So you could sort of, essentially they're mercenaries. You can pay an expert to say virtually anything you want. And that's tough. I mean, they have to base it on fact. And when you have like a gray area, it's easy for them to then try to exploit that fact. And that's where this is all coming in. Now, Jerry, I get it. Somebody called him up and said, you sold me a fake car. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. If I sold you a fake car, I will gladly make it right. But then he didn't do it. That's why these guys are suing, which makes me believe that I don't think he is calling into question the authenticity of it. Or I think that he is calling into question what they are claiming is making that car inauthentic. And that's very important to realize, that if there's a claim of whether it's authentic or not, that's whatever. It's subjective now. It's like, well, was it really driven by JFK? I don't know. Well, I think here's a picture. It looks like JFK was driving. Yeah, that is a dent in the door. This one doesn't have a dent in the door. Do you have evidence that you fixed a dent in the door? No, but it may have been fixed before. Like, all of this is the sort of stuff that is being called into question as far as the authenticity. Now, I don't really blame Seinfeld for not buying the car back. This is a question of, what would you do? If it was my car, the car is sold. I did my due diligence. I did not do anything wrong. And like, I don't want the car back, especially now that you've put it out there, drawing into doubts or casting doubts on the history or the stuff that gives the car value. You're saying, no. Now you want to dump that back on this guy and say, now you have an $800,000 car. Give me my money back, and I've just devalued your car. So it's really tough to do that. Who should be responsible? At what point in time in the documentation and history of this car should some owner take responsibility? Should the auction company take responsibility? Should the guy who authenticated it take, like, where does the fault lie, and why does it now fall on the owner? I sort of put it on the hot potato. It's like if the Pawn Stars in Vegas, Rick Harrison, if somebody walks in there and says, my grandfather was in the Civil War, he gave this to, my great-grandfather was in the Civil War, he gave it to my grandfather, who gave it to my dad, who gave it to me, and now I'm bringing it here and selling it to you. He brings an expert, he looks at it, everything checks out, he's like, all right, buys it. Then somebody else says, oh, it's not really authentic. I don't think it was in the Civil War. It was worn during practice. It wasn't worn during the war. And then now you're calling into question the value of it, or what somebody paid for it, thinking that it was more valuable. I don't think that falls back on the guy who sold it. He disclosed everything he knew about it. He represented it. You had the right to inspect it. And I think that's where I find the problem. I guess the bigger overlying problem I have here is why people pay money for stupid shit. Like, why are you paying money because it's the only green one? Why? Like, it shouldn't really, and I'm kicking myself in the nuts here because I've got a Supra which is more valuable, but I'm not going to control the market. It's more valuable because it's the last year they had the fewest in production, and it's all sort of the same thing. I just don't get the collector's market, which is why I'm selling the Supra. I'm buying one with a roll cage and built up so I can go drive it and enjoy it. But the collector's market is very funny, and it's because people are paying for stuff with stories. And then you pay for stuff with stories, you're now taking something which is arguably, like, the reason we get into cars isn't because of the value of cars. The reason we get into cars is because we think they're sexy and they're fun and they're enjoyable. And all you're doing when you make a car collectible is you're removing everything that the entire appeal of the car that gets me and virtually everyone. Nobody gets into the car market and says, I want to be a collector. You get into the car market because you like cars, and you're like, okay, now I want that one, that one, that one, that one, and you start buying more cars as you can afford them. And I think the problem we're running into here is that collectible stuff is sort of stupid. And when you start arguing over it, I don't think it's something that's going to hold water. I see this as either Seinfeld's going to be like a good dude and try to be like, look, I'll take care of it for you, and it'll go up for auction again or something like that. I don't think he should. I don't know the specific facts of the case. They haven't released what they are claiming is making it inauthentic. They're essentially saying that the files regarding the restoration are incomplete. But that doesn't make it inauthentic. That means like you're missing some documentation that this guy would like to authenticate it, but that doesn't make it inauthentic. So there you have it. And there was also a Porsche certificate of authenticity. That's very important to note that Porsche certified it. Now, the question of how difficult it is for Porsche to certify something is questionable because I don't know the actual process. But I can't imagine Porsche's just certifying cars without doing their homework on that specific car, that specific model. And I think this is a pretty frivolous lawsuit. I think it's tough because now you're marking this car as like bad. And even if they're like, okay, Seinfeld didn't do anything wrong, you're stuck with the car. Now you've killed your own market on that car because now instead of selling it as a Seinfeld car, and I guess that's what they were trying to do, or bring it to a different auction house, they brought it to one guy to resell it, and this guy said, well, I don't really feel like it's authentic. I don't know if it's just like a weird like flex trying to be like I'm better at authenticating than that guy or not, but this whole thing is fishy. Whole video. I made it through the whole video without one yada 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 or one Seinfeld reference. I applaud myself for that. Thanks for watching. Leave your comments leave your comments below. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on this one. I think it's hard to disagree here because I'm just dropping logic, but that's what the comment's for. See you tomorrow. For those of you not familiar with my other company, I started a company called Adventure Drives, which combines driving and bucket list travel. So it's a lot of fun. Our next trip is up to the Northern Lights in Iceland at the end of February. We're going to be doing snowmobiling on glaciers, off-roading, taking a dip in the Blue Lagoon, and drinking whiskey until we're silly. So that's going to be a lot of fun. After that, we're off to Europe for a trip in July. If you're interested, prices can be done per person. It starts at about $3,000 per person for Iceland. Don't worry, if you don't have somebody to go with you, we can match you up with somebody. You can check the link in the description for adventuredrives.com and sign up today.